Hey guys, it's Riley here with concealedcarry.com, and in preparation for this upcoming 21-day challenge where we're going to get you working with pistols on a daily basis, especially in dry fire, it's super important we have a conversation today about safety and about setting up your dry fire dojo, as some people like to refer to it, or the area in which you're going to perform your dry fire practice. So with that, let's talk first about 4 basic firearm safety rules, because we want to make sure we abide by these throughout everything that we do today and in all the dry fire we are doing in the coming weeks. So first and foremost is that we need to know the condition of our firearm and always treat it as a potentially dangerous tool. This is our rule number 1 at concealedcarry.com, is first to know the condition of your firearm at all times and make sure that you treat it as a potentially dangerous tool. Because regardless of the condition it's in, it is a potentially dangerous tool. It's no different than many other tools that you might be familiar with, that maybe even some of you work with professionally. In my history, I've worked with all kinds of power tools and saws and knives and all kinds of things, nail guns and so forth. And those are all tools with the potential for causing harm or danger or whatever to the person using them. A gun is the same way. So, regardless of the condition, we're going to make sure we always treat it as a potentially dangerous tool, for that is what it is. But let's talk real quick about knowing the condition of a firearm. And while we go through this today, I'm also going to walk you through my procedures for performing and conducting safe dry fire practice. And one of those is making sure that we know how to deal with this right here. This is my carry gun today. It is loaded, it is hot. At least it was last time I checked. And that's the point that I was going to make. If you have any question whatsoever, because the rule is to know the condition of your firearm, so if you have any question about the condition it is in, you should check it. I've been carrying this today, and I did check this earlier that it was loaded. I make it a habit each morning before I go out for the day. I'm carrying my gun for defensive reasons. It needs to be ready for use. That means I want it with a fully loaded magazine and a round chambered in the chamber. And that's what we have here, so that's good to see. We are going to go into the dry fire dojo here in a bit and actually conduct dry fire practice. And so we're gonna make sure that we get this loaded in the proper condition for that to occur before we do that. But that's rule number 1. Know the condition of your firearm and always treat it as a potentially dangerous tool. And you should know that with respect to what we're doing here today, we are in a safe environment for doing what we're doing. Yes, I'm handling my loaded firearm right now, but it is pointed in a safe direction. And that is part of rule number 2. And what that is always be attentive when handling a firearm and know where the muzzle is pointing. So one of the big things that I have found as an instructor in watching students that I've taught or even being a participant in other people's classes is any time a safety failure has occurred in a class or in a training environment, I can attribute all those that I have witnessed in some way, shape, or fashion to the idea that the user at that moment was not completely and 100% attentive to what they were doing with the firearm in that moment. And that's why our rule 2 is worded as it is, meaning always be attentive when handling a firearm. That's the part I want to emphasize with you today, is that everything we're going to do today with this gun or any of the dummy guns that we have in the room next door where we're going to actually have our dry fire dojo set up, is we want to be attentive when we're handling those. Learning that attention piece is also a practice. It's something that is learned. It's something that we must retain and be consistent in performing. It's not always easy to do because it's easy to have distractions. It's easy to have things come up throughout the day or even during a short 5 or 10 minute dry fire session. It's possible to have some kind of interruption. And so that's something we want to be aware of as well. Always be attentive when handling a firearm. And that's a practice that'll carry forward even when we're handling things like SIRT pistols or other blue guns or dummy guns. The second piece of that is knowing where the muzzle is pointing at all times. Well, if we're always attentive, that should be pretty easy to do, because if I'm attentive what I'm doing here, then it should be very apparent where my muzzle is pointing. And the whole time we've been talking here during this video, I've been pointing over in this general area, which is actually towards the ground, which is a concrete floor underneath here. So we know this to be a safe direction. All right, so that's our rule number 2. Number 3 is to always keep the finger outside of the trigger guard unless I am on target and prepared to shoot. So what does that look like? Well, unless I am actually aligned generally with the target that I'm preparing to shoot, then the finger needs to stay outside the trigger guard. And I'm not doing that right now, so I'm not even going to demonstrate for you what it looks like to put my finger inside the trigger guard, because what am I doing? I'm being attentive while handling this, and I'm not actually pointing or intending to shoot, even in dry fire, a particular target right now. So this finger is going to stay completely outside that trigger guard throughout the duration of this. Only when I am on target and making the decision to shoot that target am I allowed or permitted to put my finger inside the trigger guard. Rule number 4 is to always be certain of your target, the target environment, and be prepared for changes. That's a little bit more simple in a square range environment or in a dry fire environment, except for in situations where we need to be mindful of what is on the other side sometimes of where we're doing our dry fire practice. Now, where possible, I try to set up my target area where I have a really solid backer, where maybe I have a brick wall, concrete wall, CMU brick wall, whatever it is, on the other side of where I'm aiming and pointing my pistol. But not everybody has that luxury. And so in those cases, we got to make sure we take proper steps and procedures and follow those procedures to make sure we're doing everything we can to eliminate any possibility of a round discharging and going through a wall. So I got to make sure that I am aware of what's on the other side of that wall in the event I do, unfortunately, have a mistake occur and launch a projectile through that wall. So take that into account. Make sure you are setting yourself up wisely, smartly, with good procedures in place, so that, number one, we avoid anything from happening in the first place. But if something does happen, ideally we want to know what's beyond or on the other side of a wall from the targets that we are using in dry fire practice. So those are your 4 basic safety rules that we're going to follow throughout this 21-day challenge. We're going to go ahead and actually get this firearm here unloaded and ready for dry fire use. So again, following all those 4 basic rules, what we're going to start with here today is we're going to remove the source of ammunition, because that's what we got to do with a semi-automatic pistol. And you'll see here I've got a quick access vault, pistol vault, that I'm going to put that live ammo in as a good place of safekeeping, so that when I go to conduct dry fire practice in the other room, this live ammo is going to stay out here. And that's what we're doing right now. So I've still got it around in the chamber. We're going to go ahead and get that out as well. So we'll just let that fall into that vault. And then you'll see sometimes it's handy just to keep one of these in my pistol vault or safe or whatever. I usually have several available to me, but this is a barrel block, and so this one is for this pistol. It's already been trimmed to the length of barrel, and we're going to go ahead and insert this right now because we're going to go do some dry fire practice. And so let's get that in the pistol right now. And now we see we have a orange tip coming out through the muzzle end of the gun, which indicates barrel block is installed. I can also inspect it here in the chamber and see it there, but it's pretty evident that that's installed. Now what do we have? We have an inert pistol. And this, while I want to be mindful of how I'm handling the firearm, this does give me a little bit of freedom as far as how I handle the firearm. And that's really key to going into the dry fire dojo. We're going to be pointing at some targets that, hey, on the other side of that wall could be something or somebody or something that could be harmed in the event a projectile was fired through that wall. But we have a barrel block installed, and so right now what this basically is an inert pistol. It's not capable of chambering anything, and it's not capable of firing anything. That doesn't mean I'm going to disrespect this, but I'm going to be mindful about how I handle it. I'll go ahead and carefully and safely go back into the holster there, and while leaving my live ammunition outside of the dry fire dojo area, and that's out here, we're going to leave it here in this pistol vault. We're going to go ahead and go inside now to the dry fire dojo. All right, so this is what I've got set up for my dry fire dojo. Now we are in my company's office, but this is traditionally the area where we've done a lot of dry fire practice. You see I've got some targets already up on the wall, including our custom 21-day challenge targets, which are going to be the primary target of focus for the duration of the 21-day challenge. So those are ready to go, and you'll see sometimes it's nice to just have a table or something set up, a desk, anything like that. Maybe you don't have something like that that you can use, that's okay. And maybe you don't even need, many of the tools and resources that I'm going to share with you that I have out here today either. All I really need is I've got here my carry pistol with a barrel block installed. I've got my holster, and I am ready to do dry fire practice right here. Okay, and so we're ready to go. That's really all we need. Maybe a shot timer. It's not a bad idea to have because we can use shot timers to our advantage, even in dry fire, by the use of par times to give us some feedback of, hey, am I getting certain steps or drills or draw strokes or whatever it is done within a certain par time. But you'll see I have a number of resources that I have used throughout the years in various capacities in different ways. Many of them serve different purposes. Many of them have different strengths and things that they work better for. But real quick, we'll talk about those in a moment. But before I get to that, just a reminder, hey, this is the Dry Fire Dojo. I could actually say that this whole room is my dojo, or I could actually have some tape on the floor delineating that dojo area as well. If you want to just set aside a part of a room, that could be done as well. Either way, what that means is whether it's the threshold of the door we came through or this tape on the floor, this is the dry fire area. That means no live ammunition is going to be in this area. That is the best practice, best procedure for dry fire practice. So we don't want to have any potential whatsoever, because I don't have any magazines out today, but other than this is a dry fire mag here, one of the sponsors of the 21 Day Challenge. But that's obviously a dry fire magazine. That is not a live magazine. It's not capable of holding any ammunition. But if I had some magazines out here, I want to, number one, inspect those magazines, make sure that they are empty and free and clear of any live ammunition. Maybe I'm using some dummy rounds for my dry fire practice. That certainly could be a potential thing, and many of you probably do that already. I just don't want to have any chance, any possibility whatsoever of live ammunition being in this area and mistakenly ending up in a magazine or ending up in the gun somehow to where we fire around where it shouldn't go. So that's really, really super important, making sure we respect the boundaries of the Dry Fire Dojo and making sure that we inspect everything too. Because what do we have here? We have some other tools on the table. And so let's just go through these one by one and make sure that these are also complying with our safety rules. And so what we have here is a pistol with a cool fire trainer installed. And so that's pretty obvious and evident, because you see that while it does look like a barrel, if we look at this end, we'll see that's actually a nozzle where the CO2 gas is inserted into it. And we see that this barrel hood is delineated with this red, these red cutouts, which is indicating this is a cool fire trainer. That's how all of them are designed, how they're done. So cool fire trainer, great. So this is clear, empty. There's no way that this could chamber any live ammunition. Then we have another pistol here, same type of pistol, but what do I have? Very obviously a barrel block installed. And I could trim this shorter, but it's perfectly fine for today's use. So there we go. Barrel block is installed. All right, no magazine. Then what do we have here? We have a couple cert pistols from Next Level Training. So if you're not familiar with these, they're obviously training pistols. There's nothing here that's functional as a live or actual gun, and they are always colored red like this, and the slides and the triggers themselves are also red. One of the things or reasons why I'm not a super big fan of people that, like, I have no problem with people Cerakoting or painting their guns or whatever, but red or blue are colors I don't prefer to see. I've seen a few people, Cerakote their whole slide red or something like that, and we sometimes see in the training world training pistols that are colored red or blue. And so I recommend staying away from those colors when we're coloring our guns or painting our guns, because we don't want to have that become an issue later on. Not just even talking about ourselves, but somebody else thinking, oh, that's a training gun, and pick it up and not realize it's actually a live gun and capable of firing around. But there we go. We have a couple of cert pistols there from Next Level Training. We obviously talked about the Cool Fire Trainer. That's the air tank for it. And then over here we have my Mantis X10 Elite ready to go. So these are some common tools that I would have in my Dry Fire Dojo. You may not have all those tools, and you don't even need any of these tools other than, like I said, your gun, and probably like a barrel block is a good idea. These are relatively inexpensive. It's not a huge investment. We're talking like 15 bucks for some reassurance and peace of mind to know that, hey, my gun is inert and it is safe for me to conduct myself in dry fire practice now. So, making sure that we follow all the 4 safety rules that I covered in the beginning, making sure that we don't take any live ammunition into our Dry Fire Dojo. And I don't think I emphasized this enough earlier, but let's emphasize it now. Making sure that we properly unload completely our guns that we're going to use in dry fire. You saw me pull the magazine out, eject the round out of there, and then it's wise to go ahead and make sure and cycle the gun a couple of times. And of course, inspect the chamber and inspect the magazine well, make sure that there's nothing in the gun, it's not loaded at all. Check it, double check it, perhaps triple check it. We're doing dry fire practice. It only takes a few seconds to have that reassurance and peace of mind. And then of course, through the use of products like Barrel Block, gives us even a little extra layer of security, knowing that we're not going to have any problems. There's too many people that have gotten injured or killed or killed other people in their home while trying to do things like dry fire or fire maintenance and things of the sort, because they did not properly check or double check or follow the right procedures in unloading their firearms before they did things like this, like dry fire. So that's why we are giving you this information today as part of this video, is so that you know how to conduct yourself properly and safely in dry fire. One more final thing I want to touch on. Before I get to that, I talked earlier about making sure that any magazines that we're using as part of our dry fire practice, that we make sure we've gone through those, that we have inspected them as well. We got to inspect those with the same level of care as we do with the actual firearms to ensure we don't have any ammunition in those magazines that could be a problem for us. And then the final thing I wanted to touch on, I haven't mentioned yet, is I'm in the dry fire dojo right now. What do I do when I'm finished, when I'm done? Well, when I'm done with my dry fire session, and I'll tell you, just even 10 minutes a day can be hugely beneficial for you in your skill progression. So 10 minutes, cool, great. We'll do a whole bunch of repetitions, do a bunch of practice, and when we're done, I'm gonna go ahead and take this gun right here and load it back up, because I'm gonna go out about my day and I wanna make sure I've got my defensive gun properly loaded and ready to go, ready for use. Well, the time will come when I will remove the barrel block from this and I will load it back up. I will do that not inside my dry fire dojo. I'll do it elsewhere, outside there. When you do that, when you are done dry firing, I would recommend, and I know it sounds silly sometimes, but I think it's a good thing to do, that you tell yourself, even verbally, out loud, I am now done doing dry fire. I am now done doing dry fire. I am now done doing dry fire. And I am now loading my gun. My gun is now loaded. Phrases of that sort, and repeat them a couple of times. And I know it may sound a little bit silly, but I'll tell you this. One of the number one problematic times for people when they're dry firing, when the mistake is more likely to occur, is you get done and you get all loaded back up and you're like, great, cool. And 5 minutes later, you come back into the area and you're like, oh, I'll just do one more rep. And you do one more rep and bang, because you loaded your gun and you forgot that you loaded your gun. And I know it sounds maybe silly, but it happens. It happens more than you would think or realize. And so take some time and verbally mention or reinforce to yourself, hey, I am now done doing this. We are not doing dry fire anymore. And my gun is now back in a loaded condition. Rule 1, know your condition of your firearm. Just that little extra step and reminder to yourself that, hey, we're not going to do any more reps. I'm not going to pull the gun out of the holster. I don't want to take the risk of firing a round after the fact because I have a brief lapse of whatever it is. It's really fun. If you do dry fire properly, it's fun to do. And it can be really easy to fall into the trap of, I'm done, and then a few minutes later, oh, let's just do 1 or 2 more reps. Because I was really feeling it today. I was feeling good. And next thing you know, you're firing rounds. So that's another final piece of advice I would strongly recommend to you. Go ahead and set up your dry fire dojo in the way that makes the best sense for you, keeping in mind the safety rules we've talked about, some of these procedures we've discussed. Just make sure no matter what you do, that you do it smartly, safely, so we don't have any accidents. Have fun. We look forward to seeing what you can accomplish in 21 days.